phone rang at 6:17 a.m. A shrill scream slicing through the quiet of my cabin. I stumbled out of bed, heart thumping, the cold wood floor biting my bare feet. The air smelled of pine and last night's fire, still smoldering in the hearth. I grabbed the phone, expecting an emergency, maybe my sister in Boise with another one of her crises. Instead, it was Sheriff Danvers, his voice gruff, tired, like he'd already dealt with too much before dawn. "Ms. Harper, we got a call. Karen Whitlock from the HOA. Says you're trespassing on her land. Wants you out. Now." I froze, my breath catching, the phone heavy in my hand. Trespassing. On my land. The cabin my grandfather built with his own hands, where I'd spent every summer since I was 6. Rage bubbled up, hot and sharp, but I swallowed it. "Sheriff, I've got the deed. This is my property." He sighed, long and heavy, the kind of sigh that said he'd rather be anywhere else. "Just stay put. Riley, I'm coming over." The morning fog clung to the valley, wrapping my little cabin in a ghostly shroud. I stood on the porch, coffee mug steaming in my hands, the bitter roast grounding me as I watched the sheriff's cruiser roll up the dirt path. Behind it, Karen's gleaming white SUV, her HOA badge practically glowing through the windshield. She stepped out, her heels sinking into the mud, her blonde bob stiff with hairspray, lips pursed like she'd just bitten a lemon. She clutched a clipboard, her weapon of choice, and pointed at me like I was some stray dog. "You're done here, Riley Harper," she snapped, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "This land belongs to the HOA. You're squatting. I called 911, and you're leaving today." My jaw clenched, the mug burning my palms. I wanted to scream, to throw the coffee in her face, but I just stood there, staring into her cold blue eyes. This wasn't just about the cabin. This was personal. Karen had been after me since I moved back to Willow Creek 6 months ago. I'd inherited the cabin after Grandpa died, a ramshackle thing tucked in the woods, far from the HOA's manicured lawns and cookie-cutter McMansions. She hated that I didn't fit her vision of the perfect neighborhood me muddy boots, my old pickup, my refusal to pay her ridiculous fees. She'd sent letters, left voicemails, even showed up with her husband, Greg, to inspect my property line. Every time, I showed her the deed, the one Grandpa kept in a tin box under the floorboards. Surveyed, signed, notarized. Mine. But Karen didn't care about facts. She cared about control. Sheriff Danvers climbed out of his cruiser, his boots crunching on the gravel. He tipped his hat, his face lined with the exhaustion of a man who'd spent 30 years breaking up small-town feuds. "All right, ladies," he said, his voice low, like he was soothing a spooked horse. "Let's see the paperwork." Karen thrust her clipboard forward, a stack of papers fluttering like angry birds. "This is HOA property," she said, her voice rising, shrill and triumphant. "The association annexed this land last year. She's got no claim." I felt my stomach twist, a cold knot of dread. Annexed. My hands shook as I went inside, the floor creaking under my steps, and pulled the deed from its hiding place. The paper was yellowed. The ink faded, but it was real. I handed it to Danvers, my heart pounding so loud I swore Karen could hear it. He read it slowly, his brow furrowing. Karen tapped her foot, her acrylic nails clicking against her clipboard. "Well," she demanded. Danvers looked up, his eyes flicking between us. "This deed's legit, Karen. Riley's got rights to this plot. And," he paused, squinting at the paper, his face shifting, like he'd just found something unexpected. "Looks like her property line extends past the cabin, into the HOA's development." Karen's face went slack, her mouth opening, then closing, like a fish gasping for air. That's impossible, she hissed. We surveyed it. Danvers shrugged, handing me back the deed. Take it up with the county, Karen. This ain't my call. The air felt heavier now, charged, like the moment before a storm breaks. Karen's eyes locked on mine, burning with fury, but there was something else there to fear. She wasn't used to losing. I should have felt triumphant, but all I felt was tired. Tired of her vendetta. Tired of fighting for what was mine. I turned to go back inside, but then I heard Ida low, guttural sob from the trees. We all froze. Danvers's hand went to his holster, his eyes scanning the woods. Who's there? He called. No answer. Just the rustle of leaves and that soft, broken sound. Out of the fog stepped a man, thin and hunched, his flannel shirt torn, his face weathered like old leather. He looked at Karen, then at me, his eyes wet with tears. I heard everything, he said, his voice rough, like he hadn't spoken in days. I'm Tom Haskell. I used to live here, before. He gestured vaguely toward the HOA sprawl, where identical houses stood like soldiers in a row. Before they took my land. My breath caught. I'd heard rumors about Tom, the old hermit who'd fought the HOA and lost. Everyone thought he'd left town, maybe died. But here he was, a ghost from the past, his hands trembling as he pointed at Karen. She lied. They all lied. Pushed me out. Said my deed was fake too. Karen's face drained of color, her clipboard slipping from her hands. You're trespassing, she stammered, but her voice was weak, crumbling. Tom ignored her, turning to Danvers. I got proof, he said, pulling a crumpled envelope from his pocket. Letters, surveys, threats. They buried my claim, paid off the county clerk. Danvers took the envelope, his jaw tight. This true, Karen? He asked, his voice hard now, no trace of his earlier calm. She didn't answer, just stood there, her breath coming in sharp gasps, her perfect facade cracking. The next few weeks were a blur. Tom's evidence triggered an investigation, and the county dug into the HOA's records. Turns out, Karen and her board had been strong-arming landowners for years, forging documents, bribing officials, all to expand their little empire. My deed wasn't just valid, it covered half the HOA's development. Land they'd built on without permission. The news hit Willow Creek like a wildfire, whispers turning to shouts in the diner, the hardware store, the post office. People who'd cowered under Karen's reign started speaking up, sharing their own stories of harassment and threats. The courtroom was packed on the day of the hearing, the air thick with sweat and anticipation. I sat in the front row, my hands clasped tight, the deed folded in my pocket like a talisman. Karen sat across the aisle, her face pale, her usual confidence gone. She looked smaller, somehow, her shoulders hunched, her eyes darting to the exits. Tom was there too, cleaned up but still fragile, his hands gripping the bench like he was afraid it'd disappear. The judge, a stern woman with gray hair and sharper eyes, read through the evidence, her voice steady, unyielding. Ms. Whitlock, she said, your association's actions constitute fraud, coercion, and illegal seizure of property. Ms. Harper's deed is valid, and her claim extends to the disputed land. Furthermore, Mr. Haskell's evidence corroborates systemic misconduct by the HOA. The room erupted, gasps and murmurs rippling through the crowd. Karen's head dropped, her hands covering her face. I wanted to feel joy, vindication, but all I felt was a hollow ache. This wasn't just about me or Tom, it was about every person she'd bullied, every life she'd upended for her own gain. The judge continued, her voice rising like a gavel. The HOA will compensate Ms. Harper and Mr. Haskell for damages, and the county will review all related property claims. Ms. Whitlock, you and your board will face criminal charges. A sob broke from Karen's throat, loud and raw, echoing in the silent courtroom. She didn't look at me. She didn't look at anyone. Outside, the air was crisp, the sky a deep, endless blue. Tom stood beside me, his breath uneven, his eyes fixed on the horizon. I thought I'd lost everything, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Thank you, Riley, for not giving up. I nodded, my throat tight. I didn't trust myself to speak. The cabin was mine. The land was mine. But more than that, justice was ours. Not just for me, not just for Tom, but for everyone who'd been silenced, pushed out, erased. I drove back to the cabin that night, the stars blazing overhead, the scent of pine filling my lungs. The fire crackled in the hearth, and for the first time in months, I slept without fear. The deed safe under the floorboards, a promise kept to my grandfather, to myself, to the truth.